you, Dylan and Erin, for that little taster of camp. That was really exciting. I love it. It's really great to be with you this morning. It's going to be a little bit different. I'd like to share with you a little bit about camp, a little bit about what's going on this week. And link that to God's word as well, as we look at that together. So, just for those who don't know what Starfish Kids Camp is and what we're talking about when we say Starfish and camp, Starfish Kids Camp is a week-long residential camp in the summer. It's part of a bigger charity that run camps all around the world, a charity called For the Children. They run camps called Royal Family Kids Camp. We cannot call ours Royal Family Kids Camp because the Royal Family were not happy about that. So we've had to call it Starfish Kids Camp. But there are camps all around the world. There are hundreds of camps in states through the US, Australia, through countries in Africa. There's one very quiet camp in China. But basically the point of camp is that it provides amazing activities and experiences for children who are in the foster care system, who may have been affected by abuse, or in the foster care system due to the loss of their parents. And camp is, like I said, a week-long experience just to give those kids love and experiences, and just share how the hope that we have in God and how He can step into their lives as well and make a difference. Just to share some statistics with you as to why this camp is important. In 2022 to 2023, there were over 32,000 recorded cases of child abuse across England and Wales. The highest number since recording began. RCT alone has 10% of looked after children in all of Wales, second only to Cardiff. I didn't want to start on a downer, but it's important I share those statistics with you, because the title of my message with you today is We Can Make a Difference. I titled it that on purpose, not can we make a difference, but we can make a difference. And I'm really excited to announce that although we've been partnering with Cap City Church in Cardiff and their camp, they've been running for 8 years, myself, Cerys Evans now, and Ellen Morgan spent the week in director's training, so we can hopefully next year run the first camp serving children in the system in the RCT area with Bryn Sion as a host church. We can't do this on our own, of course, and I was just drawn to that verse, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So I just want to ask a few people who I've invited to share a little bit about their experience in camp this week and the way that they've seen God move. So can I invite Grace and Sam and Kath and Dylan just to come and share for a few minutes about what they've seen going on in camp this week. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So camp basically consisted of singing that song over and over and over and over again. So this year I had the same boy I had last year. He's got autism and ADHD, and this year was his last year at camp. So when they become, when they go into year 8, they are too old to come to camp. When they're 12 going on 13, they can no longer come back. So he graduated this year. And I was really expecting him to be really hard going this year, because last year he was really hard work. He didn't want to go anywhere. He was shouting and swearing at me all week. He just hated camp. He didn't really hate camp, but that was his way of coping with the love and the joy that he was feeling at camp, probably for the first time in his life. And this year he came and he was so chilled, he was so laid back, he was loving camp, and from the way that his mother is when we drop him off to the camp, really tell she doesn't really care. And Erin had his younger brother, and when we both dropped him off, she said, "Oh, thank you so much. I've had a really lovely break away from them." So she was more happy that she'd had time away from the kids and they'd had a nice time. And yeah, it was just really hard to give him back. But this year, he was so laid back and he was so chilled, and I really believe that's because he felt safe and he felt loved, and he felt the love of the Father at camp. And sort of halfway through the week, we have a birthday party. So most of the kids never ever celebrate their birthday. Most of them don't even know when their birthday is, because their parents have never even celebrated with them. They've never had presents. So each year we always have one night where we have a big surprise party for the kids, and there's pizza, there's chicken nuggets, it's basically every adult's favourite food. But they wish they could still eat all in one little plate, which is lovely. And yeah, so we had the birthday party, then give him loads of presents. And as he was opening the presents, he went really, really quiet, and like he was just not saying anything. So I went up to him, I was like, "Oh, what's wrong, you okay?" And he was like, "Oh, I suddenly feel really unwell." So I kind of figured what might be going on. So we got up and we left, and we sat down outside, and Hannah, who was the director of camp, came and sat next to me, and we were sort of just chatting with him a little bit. So then I went back into the birthday party because I was also looking after another little boy, and I was with him then. And then somebody came and said, "Oh, Hannah wants you to come out and sit by your boy again." And so I sat down with him, and he was just bawling his eyes out. He was just crying so much, and I sat down next to him, and Hannah said, "Oh, he's feeling a little bit sad that he's got to leave camp." So then I turned to him, and I put my arm around him, I was telling him how much he's loved and he is cared for. And then he turned and looked me dead in the eye. It was probably the first and only time he looked at me in the eye at camp, and that made me start crying then right in front of me. And I was just telling him that he is loved and he is cared for so much. And just the difference of these kids knowing how valued they are, even if they don't see us ever again, it's just knowing that they are valued and they are cared for. And for me, it's such a privilege to be part of Starfish, because it is such an amazing ministry that not only breaks our heart, but breaks the heart of God, and that we're able to stand next to God with our hearts broken for these kids as well. And I can't think of anything more, to be just be a part of, and there's nothing I'm more proud to be a part of than Starfish. And it is so amazing we get to serve kids here in this valley as well. Hopefully, hands together praying next year too. So yeah, thank you.
Amen.
This was my first time at the Starfish camp, and I was in the role mainly of a grandparent. We have a little grandparents' cabin, and children with their bigs, as they're called. That means the young ones who've got all the energy. They're the ones who look after them from early morning until they go to bed at night, which is about 9 o'clock. And so anytime a little group of children with their bigs want to come over, and also there are other family members as well, called cousins and aunts and uncles and everything else. So there are quite a few adults to the children, and they can come over and just chill in the grandparents' cabin. And for me, it was mainly a week, I suppose, of observing and learning. And I was absolutely blown away by what I witnessed, I have to say. When the children arrived on the coaches, there were quite a few of them who looked so apprehensive and scared, and I know that some of the adults wondered if they would actually get off the bus. And within a few hours, those same children were transformed, some of them. They were throwing themselves into every conceivable activity that was laid on for them, whether it was down the water chute, or climbing on these climbing walls, or handling snakes. I mean, they did such a range of activities, and you could see them coming out of their shells. And every day I watched as the bigs and the cousins and the aunts and uncles and grandparents interacted with them. And one of our prayers was that the children would feel safe and that there would be an overwhelming peace. And I can testify that that was the case in camp this week. I watched as those children I saw their body language, I saw the expressions on their faces and the way they would bond, the way they came up to their adult carers, if you like, and just started to really bond with them. And you could see the transformation as they felt so loved and valued. And it was just so humbling to watch. And I have to say that those of you who looked after the children, you did a fantastic job. The patience and the kindness and the compassion and the energy, I mean, it was like running a marathon, really. It was just so beautiful to see, and the love of God was so present amongst us. And I remember one little girl at the end of camp, she was very, very tearful, and apparently she said, I want to come back one day and be a director of a camp like this. It was just fabulous, so I would encourage anybody. However, you know, you may not think, well, I can't do very much. I mean, I felt like that all week. I felt, well, I'm not doing very much. I'm just sort of around, you know. But I think everybody pulling together and working as a team can create such a beautiful atmosphere and such a lovely family for those children to feel respected and valued and loved. I saw it with my own eyes. It was incredible. So thank you.
Hello. It was also my first year at camp, and my role was a cousin. And before I went to camp, everyone was warning me how emotional it'd be, and that, you know, they said it is emotionally draining and spiritually, and I was like, yeah, okay. I didn't really believe them. But since coming back from camp, I can now vouch for that. Even just seeing the kids come off the bus as they first arrived, it's quite difficult because you see them all. They're all so innocent, and they're all beautiful inside and out. And they're all just amazing kids. And there was this one little girl that I got to spend lots of time with. She was 7 years old. And the first night we had a carnival, and there was bouncy castles, popcorn, face paint. And we were on this bouncy castle slide. I must have done it like 20 times. She was so energetic. And anyone who was at camp will tell you her smile was infectious, and she just loved every moment of it. But we were up on the bouncy castle slide, and she turned around and she said, "This is the best day of my life." And that kind of struck a chord with me, because I think most of us here, I think, you know, bouncy castles and face paint are a normal part of childhood. But this is the first time she's ever experienced that. And that's one reason I love camp, is because I think at camp is the only time some of these kids ever experience the unconditional love of God. Yeah. And they realise, no matter who they are, that people love them.
Yes, amen.
So what I would say is, if you've thought of volunteering for camp, or even if you haven't, I'd say 100% do it, because I can wholeheartedly say that this camp has changed my life, because it's given me a new outlook. And there's this line that's been going over my head, which is, break my heart, what breaks yours? And God's definitely done that this week. And my heart has been broke for these children. So I would say, if you can, I would 100% volunteer, because there's no feeling like it.
I probably will get emotional, because I have been completely broken, just like everyone who's been there. So I was supposed to share this at the welcome home dinner, but when we got there, I was blubbering, I just couldn't speak. And at camp, we do something called Story of the One, and this is my story of the one. So like we always talk about that starfish on the beach, being the one that can be saved, and this boy, oh my gosh, he broke my heart. So Starfish Camp obviously makes like such an incredible difference to all the kids who have experienced abuse, and we were able to step in that gap for them. We were able to put like our own little mark of how much God can love them. We're only with them for that short amount of time, but that short amount of time, oh my gosh, it makes such a big difference to their lives. So my week at camp went very, very differently to how I thought it would go. I first applied to be a big, which is what like most people here did, in the sense of I would have 2 girls, I'd be in a family pod, and I would just be with those girls for the whole week. But Hannah, the director, asked me to step in to be part of the leadership team, just to help out with, so there's something called royal treatment, to make sure the staff well-being is okay, and also they wanted me to be on the stage to do the drama, so I was doing those 2 roles. I wasn't really sure about it because I know that my heart and I know that God has called me to work with these kids, so when I found out I wasn't going to have kids, I was a bit miffed off, I've got to be honest. And I was like, no, I know I need to work with these kids and I know that I need to do something, so I was a bit angry with Hannah, but here we go. So the first day that the kids came, I went to the church where all the kids were picked up. I went on the bus with them. I was able to see, like, I was kind of able to gauge how the kids were going to cope just based on that first, like, through interactions. And then when we actually got to camp then, you know, all the bigs got to go and spend all this time with the kids, and I was there like, I'm really angry right now, like this should be me. And I was in the staff room for about over an hour making coffees, and I didn't even like coffee. I was like, why am I making coffee for people when I should be out there doing this? And then I got a bit upset because I was like, this isn't what I'm called to do. I'll admit I went to my room and I had a cry. I got really angry with God and I was praying to him and I was asking him, why have I been put in this leadership role when this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing? And yeah, so then I was like praying to God, I was really angry. And I asked him how this had happened to me when I know that I needed to be with the kids more. So literally, like a few seconds later, I made the coffee for Alex, who goes to a different church, but he was a big. Made a coffee for Alex, went to take it to him, and then the boy that he had went, oh, can I have a cup there? And I went, ooh. I was like, right, give me 5 minutes. I was like, if I do it for you, I'm going to have to do it for all of these kids now. So I said, right, if you go and wait in the dinner hall for me, I will bring a cup of tea to you, but it's just got to be you. So we did that and he waited. Although I almost poisoned him, as he says, I poisoned him. I gave him salt instead of sugar. It wasn't good. Although I almost poisoned him, I thought he's never going to speak to me again. We instantly clicked. He's been going to camp since he was 6 and this was his last year, so he's 11 now. Yeah, we just clicked, and he'll absolutely hate me for saying this. He even admitted he was obsessed with me by the end of the week. But the truth is, I was completely obsessed with him too. And I couldn't wait to just pour out God's love onto him, and it was just absolutely amazing. So this boy, as it was his last year, he has been very tricky in previous years. Like, he is that naughty boy. He's the one that, you know, refuses to come into the hall, he will kick off at bedtime, he gets very angry, he punches, he kicks. I've been beaten and bruised, I've been called every name under the sun this week, but it's worth it. On the Wednesday, he started to get a little bit upset. And he kept saying to me, oh, it's a headache, it's a headache. I knew deep down he wasn't a headache. It was because he knew that this was his last year at camp, he knew that he wasn't able to come back. So he asked me then to go on the field and go and kick a football. And as we were doing that, he just kind of looked at me and just stared at me for ages. And he wasn't saying anything. And then all of a sudden he just turns to me and he goes, I'm really glad you're not a big this year and you're on the leadership team. And I said, oh, why is that? And then he said, because now you've got to spend so much time with me. And I'm going to hold back my tears because I'd previously told him I had loved him and I was blubbering, and he told me off, he gave me a rough crying. And I said, you know what though, so am I. I'm really glad that I'm not a big this year. So something that I was so angry with God about, God completely turned around and he knew what he was doing. He knew that I needed to be a part of that leadership team, to be with this boy. Yeah. I'm going. So then later on at bedtime, he had a different routine to the other boys because he wouldn't go to bed. and we were on the swings, and he brought this up again about how he preferred me as part of the leadership team compared to being a big. And then all of a sudden, without any prompting at all, he just turns to me and he goes, "That was definitely God." And I was like, wow, this boy who would be considered as naughty, and I don't think really was listening during all of those times that we were on, like, while I was on the stage pretending to be Joseph rolling around on the floor. I didn't think he was listening to that, but he just turned to me and said, "That was God." And I explained to him how I had cried on the first day of camp. I had prayed to God, asking him why I was in this role. And then I explained how, like, God had worked in my life, but also how he had worked in his life, because I was able to spend that time with him. But it was just amazing to see how this 11-year-old boy who has gone through, like, so much could understand that God could work in his life and God could turn a bad situation around. So I'm just praying, and I really hope that you pray with me that he continues to do that for the rest of his life. And I explained how, like, he was clearly the reason I had been put into this role, so I was able to spend that time with him. And this camp, this is why I'm just so passionate about this, so please, if you can come. And if you can't come, please donate. Like, just please, like, everything. It's amazing. We're able to plant those seeds into the kids, and it just takes that tiny little bit of faith, that tiny little bit, that we're able to just, step into that gap for these kids, and we're able to just pray for them and just show them the love of God, which they haven't experienced before. And it's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. You've got to see it to believe it. Like, there's only so much we can say, but it's amazing. You've got to do it. Amen.
Thank you so much, guys, for coming in and sharing. And I know it's hard, because it's hard to describe what happens in camp if you haven't been there. Like Dylan says, you cannot begin to expect or picture what actually goes on. And we could be here all day, with stories about how God has moved. But we won't, because we all need some dinner as well. So I'm just going to bring 3 points. And I won't take much of your time, but just to back up that point that I made earlier, that we can make a difference through camp. You might think that it might be slightly cruel to give these kids such an amazing experience for 1 week of the year, and then they have to go back to their homes. But I just want to start with a little story, and that's imagine somebody lived in a desert all of their lives. They were born in the desert, they were raised in the desert, all they know is sand and heat. And one day they come across an oasis. They taste the fresh water, they feel the shade of the palm trees. And although they can't stay at that oasis because it will dry up and they have to move on, they've got hope that they will come across another oasis another day. And that's exactly what camp does. It gives these kids hope for their future. It gives them a glimpse of what could be. That everything they've experienced in their lives so far is not the be-all or end-all, but actually there is something greater out there. There are people who love them. There is a God who knows their name. And that's exactly what camp does. So why should we do camp? Sorry, this microphone is funny position. There we go. Why should we do camp? My first point is that it honours God the Father. In James chapter 1, verse 27, if you want to open up, I'll give you a little minute to flip through it. James chapter 1, verse 27. It says that pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for the orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. I gave you those statistics earlier about the number of children in care, the number of children who've been affected by abuse. And to many people, it may not make much sense that one camp can make such a difference. But actually God's word tells us that you will come across those people who have those doubts. Sometimes you may have those doubts yourself. When you look at a camp of 30 kids and you remind yourself of that moment and think, what difference can it really make? But actually, it honours God the Father when you take that time to care for the orphans and the widows. Does anybody like Play-Doh here? Yeah? Anybody got Play-Doh stuck in their carpet from 20 years ago? Yeah? Well, I was really encouraged listening to somebody talk about when we come to camp, we've got to come with Play-Doh hearts. What happens when you don't use Play-Doh for a while? It goes hard, that's right. But if you allow God to manipulate your Play-Doh heart, to mould it, to bend it, to break it, your Play-Doh heart will remain soft. And more than that, it'll bear the marks of its creator, of its moulder. And we've got to come to camp with that Play-Doh heart, with a soft heart, ready to be used by God in any way. Because when we do that, that is our true worship to Him. Like James says, that is our pure and genuine religion. That is our pure and genuine worship to God, allowing Him to use our hearts, to break our hearts for what breaks His, and to use it for His glory. My second point is, it doesn't just bring honour to God the Father, but it's what Jesus did. We've got so many examples from the beginning of Jesus' ministry right to the end of the way that He stepped in and He cared and loved and served the broken. He didn't, like He said, He didn't come to the people who are well. People who are well don't need a doctor. He came to serve the people who were sick, who were broken-hearted. It's what He did. And He didn't just tell us, but He showed us. In Matthew 16, He heals a boy who is sick and possessed. In Matthew 19, He blesses children that others turned away. In Mark 1, He heals a man shunned from society because of his illness. In Luke 17, He heals 10 who were shunned from society because of their illnesses. In John 4, He spends time and reveals who He is to a Samaritan woman who was also shunned from society. In Luke 14, He chooses to heal a sick man while having dinner, and then tells the Pharisee who was putting him up for dinner, next time, invite the poor, the cripples, the lame, and the blind, please, and don't worry about them paying, because God will repay you. We have that perfect example of how to do it, what heart we need to come to it, because of Jesus, because of the example that He has set before us. My third point, very simply, is that it's what Jesus has already done for us. In Ephesians 6, I'll give you a little minute if you're going to turn to that as well. Ephesians 6. Sorry, Ephesians 2, verse 6. I wrote all this down on a night shift at 3 o'clock in the morning, so I had to review it, and some of it I cross out somewhere, so it doesn't make too much sense. But yeah, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 6 says, for He raised us from the dead, along with Christ, and seated us with Him in the heavenly realms, because we are united with Christ Jesus. It's already been done for us. We have been adopted into God's royal family. Kath made a point earlier, which was that so many of the volunteer positions of camp are named with family members' names, cousins, aunties, uncles, grandparents. And that is because so many of these children have not experienced a normal functioning family where they get to build positive relationships with people with those titles, with aunties, uncles, cousins, grandparents. They don't have those people in their family, parents. But we have. We have been adopted into God's family. And not just any family, but the most high family, most exalted family, God the Father's family. in the history of the universe. We have been seated alongside him as sons and daughters of the creator of the universe. How amazing is that? When we take a minute to really take that in, we can be so quick to forget that, can't we? You know, we label ourselves as Christians, as followers of Jesus, and servants of Christ. We don't always think of ourselves as children of the Most High, as sons and daughters of the Creator of the universe. And if we have been given that label, if we have been exalted to that place, then how much more do we need to pass that on to the least of these, to the children who have not had that experience, to the children who don't always know their birth parents, let alone a Heavenly Father. How much more is it our duty to pass that on to them? There's a quote by a lady called Joy Marino, and it says that people raised on love see things differently than those raised in survival. And that's how most of these children have grown up, in survival mode. When you think of yourself in a stressful situation, you go to one of 4 natural instincts, and that's to fight, that's to freeze in the situation, that's to fawn, which means just to give in, and that's flight, just to run away from it. Most of those children have been in that mindset for the majority of their lives. They have never come to a point of rest and acceptance and peace. But camp gives them that opportunity, not because of anything necessarily that we can offer them, but because what God has already done for us and what we are simply passing on. That is the whole point of camp. It's an opportunity for us to step up to our highest calling as a church together and as the wider body of Christ. Because this is not just going to be a Bryn Sion mission. This is not just going to be a Bryn Sion and Gateway mission. This is going to be a mission for the local church. This is going to be a mission for the church with a capital C, for the body of Christ. These children are on our doorstep. You know, we serve these children in our kids' clubs and don't always know it. So, just coming to the end, you know, having said all that I've said, having shared the stories that the volunteers have already shared, you might still be sat there saying, Naz, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can be a part of this. Due to my experiences, or due to where you feel that you know, the energy that you've got, you might not be able to apply. I haven't got the energy, I haven't got the enthusiasm, you might be thinking. I just want to encourage you, there is a place for camp for everybody. If you have experienced God's love, if you have experienced His forgiveness, then there is a place for you to serve inside and outside the camp. So as I just come to the end, you know, I just want to ask that question, do you think we can make a difference? We might not be able to make a difference to all of them, is the bottom line. But I just want to share a story with you. And this is the whole ethos of the Starfish Kids Camp. And that one day, there was a storm. There was terrible winds, there was terrible rain, and in a little beach town, hundreds and thousands of starfish were washed up on the beach in the night. And a man went out for a walk in the morning to assess the damage, to go and see what's happened. And as he's walking down the bay, he sees a little boy who he thinks he can see dancing on the beach. So he goes over and he has a little look. And as he gets closer, he notices the boy is not dancing, but actually he's picking up, one at a time, one of these starfish that have washed up, one of these hundreds of thousands of starfish that have washed up, and he's throwing them back in the sea. And then he's taking a few steps, and he's picking another one up, and he's throwing another one in the sea. And the man watches him for about 10 minutes as he's walking along the beach doing this. Every few steps, he'll pick up a starfish and he'll throw it back in the sea. So the curiosity got the better of this man. And he asked the little boy, what are you doing with those starfish? And the little boy shouted up and he replied, I'm throwing them back in the sea, where they belong. So the man watched him for a little bit longer, and he said, little boy, there's hundreds of thousands of starfish on this beach. You don't think you can make a difference to all of them, do you? And the boy carried on, he bent over, he picked up another starfish, and he threw it back in the sea. And he looked up at the man, and he said, I made a difference to that one. And that's the whole point of this camp. We're not going to be able to make a difference to all of them. However, we can make a difference to the one.
Amen.
There is a place for everybody in camp. There is a way that everyone can serve. I'm going to be bold and say that this may be one of the biggest missions we've gone through as a church. This is huge. Huge. If I give you some statistics as an example, to run a camp next year, we need to raise between £20,000 and £25,000. If we are going to take 30 children to camp, we need around 50 to 55 volunteers to volunteer in all sorts of capacities in camp. We need different teams outside of camp for prayer, for sending off the kids and volunteers, for welcoming them home. This is going to be a huge mission. We can't do it in our strength, is the bottom line. But each one of the testimonies you've heard this morning are testimonies of God's power and God's heart and God's love, and the way that He steps in when we step forward, and He makes the impossible possible. So I just want to encourage you with that this morning. And I just thank you. And I'm really looking forward to this next year together. It's going to be big, but it's exciting. It's going to take a lot of faith. But I'm believing in a God that we've seen move powerfully in the past. We can look back on those Ebenezers, on those stones that we set up, those altars we set up, and we can remind ourselves of the God that we serve, and how we know that He will step in when we step up as well. Thank you.